Juliet, which is the show to end all shows, the cliche to end all cliches, but it's not just that. Everyone that's here every day working on it realize that there's so much more in it than each individual person thinks. And this production is striving to remind you of why the show is so well known and why it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think that we're moving past, the preconceived notions of this is Romeo and Juliet, this is the classic love story, this is where the two lovers die at the end. It's much more than that. It's much more than the freshman year CA, book project that you did on it. It's experiencing the human emotion of each of the characters and the evolution of all these characters. Well, first of all, people don't understand that Juliet's 13. She's really a child.
Juliet child.
And people I think that she's either portrayed as someone who's so innocent that she is bumbling and doesn't really know what she's doing, or she's portrayed simply as a sex symbol and she's portrayed much more experienced than she actually is. And Juliet is, although she is innocent, she is an extremely strong character, and throughout the play she proves herself to be of higher intelligence than Romeo, and she can outwit him. She's able to show that she won't settle for someone who isn't going to give her her full attention, and I think that we're moving past, the outline of what Juliet and what Romeo, what the characters are, and moving forward to what are these people and what do they go through. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Their relationship together just builds parallels between these two characters, where we become closer and closer. We start to react the same way to news that we hear. We start to think the same way, and we are intertwined by the end of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And David, you're about the same age as Romeo is,
yes.
but Catherine, you're a bit older than Juliet. So how do you guys prepare to play these characters?
There are things that Juliet goes through that are in my past, and it's hard to remember exactly how it felt, but I have to recall exactly how it felt to make it real.
Especially since she's such a pedestaled character that it's hard to make her real at all.
Right, exactly. I mean, she can't be this, this picturesque statue of perfect Juliet. I mean, she's flawed, and she's confused, and she's young, and she goes through a lot of different thoughts about what's going on, and I want to be able to portray her as the human that she is, rather than, the famous character Juliet. Like, for us, accessing the emotions that are necessary for these characters, we've found to be really, really difficult.
They're
very draining.
Yeah, I leave rehearsal every single day, like, feeling like I ran a marathon. We go through, we talked about this, we go through like the gamut of human emotions in this show. We go from the utmost joy of falling in love to
the absolute worst.
The worst. I mean, losing the person that you are closest to and being able to see them physically dead in front of you and having to deal with that grief. And we're pulling from real life, experiences, and it's hard. It is really, really difficult.
It's what we are finding so much joy in this production doing, is playing with that difficult, never-ending problem of making someone else real in yourself.
I think that placing it in the Victorian era is changing the way that we're looking at this script. I think it's allowing us to see the timelessness of Shakespeare's work, because Shakespeare's work is applicable in any generation that you put it towards, whether it's modern day or Victorian era or in the Renaissance. The human emotion is still the same. We still all go through the same despair if we lose a loved one. We all go through the same joy if we fall in love. And I think that by setting it in another era, we're opening up the doorway for the audiences to see that Shakespeare is much more than something that's dusty in the back of a shelf.
And also, there's a different way in which the Victorian woman and man hold themselves, and a different way between how they're supposed to interact with each other and how the characters are allowed to socially interact within different environments, and that adds a lot to the tension of the ball scene and how the characters shouldn't be like touching each other, they shouldn't be interacting, they shouldn't be talking this much. But then when they go dance, we're able to, oh, I get to touch you. This is so scandalous, in the words of Becca. And it just adds a whole new level, and it brings everything that Shakespeare wrote up into this different age of, it's this much higher, adds this much more.
Yeah, and I think that it's easier to show the progressive relationship of Romeo and Juliet through the really, really strict confines of relationships in the Victorian era, and how etiquette made it so that people had to go through different steps of courtship to get, to the point of engagement and marriage and, all of those things. And just seeing Romeo and Juliet go from just a single glance can mean so much. And, like David said, like in the ball scene, just putting a hand on a hand is something completely electrifying. And I think that helping the audience to notice those small nuanced things is really important, and putting it in the Victorian era is allowing us to do that. So I think that our production is striving to show that it's much more than just a mushy-gushy romance story. It's a story of hatred, and it's a story of what we can learn from unneeded hatred in today's world and where that can lead for us. And I think that we're ready to show the audiences that Romeo and Juliet is more a story of the hatred between these families overcoming the love of Romeo and Juliet than vice versa. Yeah.